The Intertech Group and the Zucker family are proud to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment.
Welcome to We the Women. This is our celebration of the 19th Amendment. Exactly 100 years ago, on August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified, giving women the right to vote. To celebrate, we'll be talking to women from around South Carolina, thought leaders, movers and shakers. We'll ask them about how they have used their voice and what they have done to contribute to our great democracy. Enjoy the conversation.
All right, well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, and I'm just excited to talk to you today.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, and so I report on tourism at the Post and Courier. So
and you do a fantastic job.
Thank you. But of course, we talk a lot for that reason. So just to start, I mean, you're the top tourism leader in what is, by at least several magazine standards, the #1 city in the U.S. And right now we're in the middle of probably the most challenging time that the tourism industry has gone through. So how are you doing right now?
A loaded question. No.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that I would say that the team and I over at Explore Charleston are doing really well. And we're really focused on the future. And it has been such a strange time for us. We're so used to being that team that's planning 6 to 24 months out, whether it's for a meeting or convention coming to town or a new marketing campaign. And we really are focused right now on just doing the next right thing, whatever that is. So we've sort of added that short-term planning to our list. We haven't abandoned the long-term planning, but it's interesting that right now our highest priority is just that next right thing for keeping people safe and keeping people healthy and really keeping people employed. There are about 40,000 people in our workforce that depend on tourism, and we want them to be able to support their family.
What's been surprising for you in just these last few months? I mean, you've been working in tourism your whole career, but again, this is just I know the word unprecedented is overused, but just this unexpected time. What's been surprising you?
Well, I think the thing that has reassured me the most is that Charleston is that special place that we tell the world it is. I've just seen some really amazing things happen. I mean, like we all know that small business is the backbone of America, but we felt it in a different way during COVID. And it's mostly because I've seen people do these amazing things, these owners that are, whether it's doing takeout or, transferring to online sales, to do anything they can to keep people employed. And I even have a good friend, I tease her all the time, I'll call her and say, so, do you sell anything to make payroll today? But it's just that kind of spirit is still there. And I keep reminding everybody that all the things that made Charleston special will still be here when the pandemic is over.
And I know you said just personally, this has been a difficult time for you. You're a very social person. I think people know you usually greet someone with a hug. You can't do that right now.
It's really hard. It's really hard. I think that we, in the hospitality industry, obviously, we're very focused on service. And so much of that service is demonstrative. And whether that's the warm smile that now you can't always see behind the mask. So we have to smile with our eyes now, we say. But that part is hard, but it'll be back. And so, how do we convey welcome and warmth, without being able to physically touch someone or to shake their hand or give them a big hug? That's the challenge, and we're ready to meet it.
So I want to ask you about your career overall, and I'm curious, did you always know that you wanted to work in tourism?
Well, I thought I wanted to be a banker. My dad was a very successful mortgage banker. And growing up in Charleston, I thought, what a great career, I'll be a banker. Well, when I left Ashley Hall and got to Clemson, my second semester sophomore year, I decided that 8 o'clock level 2 accounting class was not for me. And I went through, this is when Clemson still had a catalog, and I went through like, what can I pick to graduate in 4 years? And Clemson University had a new degree for tourism management, and that was the answer. And that's how it started. And from there, I did my internship at the Columbia Convention and Visitors Bureau. And then my first job was at Wild Dunes Resort as the concierge. And then for the Visitors Bureau, I started selling ads in the Visitors Guide.
So I'm curious about that first job at Wild Dunes. Did you enjoy that? Was that a good fit for you? What was that first job like?
Absolutely loved it. And I tell everybody when I retire,
can
that's what I'm going to do that now. That's what I'm going to go back to. Being a concierge at a beautiful resort is, the best job in the world because people are happy and you're helping them plan their time. And it was just an amazingly great job for me. And selling ads in the Visitor's Guide was really fun too because I learned that no was just the start of the sell. And that has served me well my whole career.
So how did that job selling ads for that Visitor's Guide, how do you get from there to leading the entire organization?
Well, the Convention and Visitors Bureau was really small then. There were 5 original employees, and I was actually number 6. So the sales manager, whose job I got, was just the best job ever, right? So getting to sell Charleston to meetings and conventions was really easy, and I loved it. So I went from there to marketing, to be the director of marketing, and then when I was 26, way before I was ready or prepared, I got the job of executive director about 2 weeks before Hurricane Hugo. And that was a big challenge as it relates to after we had Hugo. It was the time to do the right thing. And, I remember coming back into Charleston after Hugo thinking, what am I going to have to sell? Mm-hmm. And a lot like today, all the things that make Charleston special were still there. They're beat up, like physically beat up, where we're kind of personally beat up now. But all the things were still there. And so that really changed my outlook for leadership for my whole career.
That's a really young age to take on that position. I'm curious, what were the ages of your coworkers? Did you ever have any concerns or even issues about being the authority figure? And I would say not even within your organization, but I'm sure you're going into other spaces in that executive director role where I'm sure you're probably the youngest person in the room a lot of times.
Yeah, most often I was. And it's really hard not to be that person anymore, by the way, because we used to, we wouldn't be completely dishonest, but sometimes we would lead people to believe we were older than we were because the 5 of us were fairly young. But now that we're old, we say, wow, we don't have to add that 5 years to our age anymore. But it was interesting that a lot of women in this community really helped me in terms of knowing that I was probably in over my head, and that I was willing to work really hard. And so that was a real gift.
Who were some of the women who did that for you?
Well, there's so many. One of the ones that I just, to this day, she still is that person that I can always look to, is Dr. Mary Thornley, who is president of Trident Tech. And she has been my chairman for the Convention Bureau. And she's just got that spirit of, okay, this is a serious problem, but we can figure a way out of it. And that's so critical in terms of what we do every day. But I've been blessed with so many great mentors, in the business world. There are folks like Martha Rivers Ingram, who is the most amazing businesswoman, and Anita Zucker, right? And Lou Hammond Associates. And, these ladies are leading these huge companies with this, global impact. And they're still the most approachable and the most friendly and the most caring. And, that's a gift to have those kind of folks. And, I guess in my life with my child, as a kidney transplant patient, I've seen these really amazing women at the medical university. My son's pediatric nephrologist, who also has an expertise in transplant, Dr. Catherine Twombly, she is able to do research. She's able to take care of patients, and she's got a beautiful family that she takes care of. And there's so many of those folks over there that inspire me every day and remind me why I'm not in the brain surgery business. I'm glad I'm in the tourism business. I'm not dealing with life and death issues, right? And so they really inspire me. And probably in my personal life, there's this amazing woman named Connie Thompson, who's really like a second mom to me. And she's 94 years old. And she was the first pharmacy graduate female from the Medical University. And she still to this day, she drives and she reads the Wall Street Journal cover to cover every day. And she's so relevant and she's such an encourager to me. Like she'll call me this afternoon and say, so how did that interview go? She's just such an encourager. And with my last group probably is my family, because I've got some really amazing sisters and aunts because my mom died young. And that having that love of people that support you no matter what really matters. And I guess I'm old enough to know now that not everybody was blessed with a great family, and I really was.
And you grew up here in Charleston. I'm curious, what do you think is something that women who grow up in Charleston maybe have in common?
Well, one of the things that's a real blessing in my life is that my parents sacrificed to send my sisters and I to Ashley Hall School, and it's an all-girls school. And, it just gives you this confidence foundation that I don't know that everyone has that opportunity to have. And my friends at Clemson used to tease me and say, you are so brave. And I really didn't know that the girls weren't supposed to be in charge, right? Because when you go to Ashley Hall, the girls are in charge of everything. And so I think that I was fortunate to have that kind of solid platform. And I think there are a lot of women in this community, because of Ashley Hall, that have this real solid foundation. And, that's kind of a basis. Like my dear friends that I grew up with are still my friends, right? They're still the ones that are encouraging me. And it's interesting that solid foundation that you get at that age is really important as a girl.
That's interesting that you said when you went to Clemson, you had people saying that you were brave. Oh, can you think of anything that you were doing that made someone say that made someone notice that maybe you had a different kind of leadership experience?
I think that maybe because I wasn't afraid to speak up, or I wasn't afraid to contribute. And Clemson is a really big school, and I've been at a small school, and you just sort of find your place within your own little group. And whether it was being involved in student government or my sorority or with IPTE, it was really fun for me, but I just always felt very comfortable speaking up in a real positive way, not in a negative way. But I think that was the difference, is I just realized that some people perhaps held back a little bit, and I didn't know that till I was older.
Mm-hmm. I guess when did you know that then?
Like my freshman year.
Yeah.
People were like, you are so brave. And I was like, well, let's do this. Let's, and they'd be like, really? You're willing to talk to them about that? And I'm like, yeah, should I not be? And so it was really more of I don't think I knew what I had.
Yeah.
Until I got there.
Yeah. So I want to go back to you at 26 being the executive director. Like you said, that was just a couple of weeks before Hurricane Hugo. What were those first weeks like? I know even before we started talking officially for this interview, you were talking about when your team was in a trailer, working right after the hurricane. But what were those first weeks like, new to that job, and really just Charleston trying to recover?
Well, one of the things that has been interesting about the pandemic and it affecting the whole world is I realized, talking to my colleagues around the country, that we in Charleston, specifically along the coast, we were not as disturbed in terms of how to act quickly, because we have a lot of hurricane experience, right? For better or for worse, this community knows how to come together and react to a crisis. And it's been interesting that little bit of a head start that we as a community had has probably really paid dividends for us in terms of the long-term plan, in terms of we're not scared to plan for the long term, because we know it'll be back, because we've lived through those before, and we know that as much as it is absolutely horrible now, it won't always be like this. And because we've been through it. And I think our challenge as leaders right now is to help those people who haven't done it, right? Who haven't had to go through something difficult, to be the encourager, to say, it really is hard right now, but I promise it's going to get better. And they know we lived it.
Mm-hmm. So I think now, like I mentioned before, Charleston's been named the #1 city, at least by Condé Nast specifically, 9 times so far. And last year, the last time that Charleston was named #1, I spoke with the editor of Condé Nast Traveler, and I remember the way she described it is that Charleston has kind of a glow around it, which is an interesting way to describe it, but I also think it makes sense in terms of how other destinations see the city, and then and even I think how residents see it. It's almost like a given now, but I know what we've talked about before is just the time that it took to get there, and the difference between having that glow and the work it took to get there, right? So I know we've talked about that before in the context of bringing the first international flight, and I was wondering if you could talk about that again, just those early travel conferences, those times before Charleston was on any of these lists, before Charleston was on that international radar.
Well, it was funny because people that have come here recently, they don't know what it was like before, right? So when some of us are in awe, right, a little bit in awe that someone is recognizing us in that way, there's still, as it relates to Condé Nast, the first time we were on the list, I mean, we took San Francisco's place, who the readers had chosen for 18 years in a row. And I remember saying, not to discount our great community, but just said, us? Really? I mean, we have been outvoted, that they want us. So it was interesting that when you really dig into those numbers, back to what makes Charleston special is always still there. When you dig into the numbers, we don't have the absolute most luxurious accommodations in the world. We don't absolutely have the most fantastic restaurants or the greatest attractions or the greatest shopping. But what we do have is the greatest hospitality. And if you look at the rankings, every year for the last 9, we've won because of the hospitality of the community. And we're really good in all of those categories, but it's the way people feel when they're here that encourages, I guess, the reader to make that choice for us. But when you think about, I work in a place on King Street that I wasn't allowed to ride my bike when I was little, right? So the vibrancy that we see today, it would have been hard to imagine then. And fortunately, there were some great visionaries like Mary Joseph P. Riley who did see that, right? Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to share with people the nuts and bolts of getting there, because it's a slow moving process. You mentioned British Airways, and what a wonderful win for our community. Really, all of our air service is really one of the most fun things I've ever been involved with. And it looks like we're going to be starting it again based on our current air service. But it was really fun to do it, but it was a long process. And it's, nothing worth having comes easy. And I guess the greatest advice I always give folks is just continue to be really, really curious, and just know that whatever you choose to do is going to take a lot of hard work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess what did you hear earlier on in your start with Charleston Tourism as you were trying to promote the city? Because like we said, it didn't always have this international reputation. What was your approach?
Well, when I got to the CBB, we were still sort of the folks that said, "Oh, come see the azaleas in the spring," right? Yeah. So we had that moonlight and magnolias narrative. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think we've done very wisely is we've done a lot of research in terms of who is the traveler that is going to be attracted to our community, because the reality is it's not the right destination for everybody. If you're looking for the Las Vegas experience, you're probably not going to choose Charleston, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we know what we have. And in all of the surveys that we do, history and culture is always the number one reason that people come here. And that sounds a little bit weird, like you're here to go see Fort Sumter, you're here to go see a historic house. But it's really the sense of place that visitors see. There's nothing else like it. It's our differentiating factor, right? There's not another Charleston, South Carolina in the world. And that is probably the most important thing that we've done, is to sell that authentic story of who we really are. And, and certainly lately our past is not all beautiful, right? And, being forthright about what we're all about has resonated with the visitors that we've attracted, as they're interested in that authentic story. So it's been fun for us.
What have the conversations been in the last couple of months? Because of course, with protests related to racial equality, the Black Lives Matter movement, I mean, African American history is just incredibly important to the context of this city and this community. What have been the conversations?
Well,
happening?
Black history is knit into the very fabric of who we are as a Charleston community. I mean, it's a part of every single part, from the historic houses to the amazing food that we have. So it's really integrated. And one of the things that because our community suffered the horrific murders at Mother Emanuel, in so many ways we got a little bit of a 5-year jump on some of these difficult conversations that the rest of the country is having too. And back to my heroes, 2 amazing women, Miss Polly Shepard and Felicia Saunders. I mean, Saunders, they are the most amazing women, because they lived through the worst that can be thrown at them, and here they are, the ones that are encouraging other people, right? So they're so moving, and they've inspired my whole staff. I mean, these women are those people that everyone, and they're the heroes that the United States should have, right? That they have been able to do that. And it's funny with Miss Polly, she serves with me on the Mother Emanuel Foundation, where we're looking to have that beautiful memorial take place. And she's part of the vision that we need to honor those folks that were stolen from us, but at the same time we need to look to the future. And part of the magic of that memorial is the part that is looking toward the future. And when they said those magic words that the Lord requires us to forgive, but reconciliation takes work. And I think that that's what we all need to do, is focus on that work that it takes to get to the finish line.
Yeah. I think just beyond elevating stories and the history, definitely one of the conversations happening too is how do we elevate Black-owned businesses? How do we elevate the community economically? And of course, tourism is a huge economic driver in our community. What are some of the ways you think that tourism can lift up Black-owned businesses and bring them, more of that economic benefit that can make, of course, a huge difference for families and business owners?
Well, we're so excited about the renovation of the visitor center, our visitor center on Meeting Street.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a whole new setup, and we're using that opening of the visitor center, whatever that might be,
Right.
To take the opportunity to not only lift up the Black businesses that are currently our members, but to find those businesses who perhaps might not even think they could appeal to visitors, and to get them into the family. And we're really excited about that, because if we don't have Black businesses benefit from all of this, we've lost somehow. So our goal has been, how can we spread that in terms of getting those folks in the tourism family, so to speak, to lift them up to the visitor market, and help them along that path. And as we lead up to the opening of the International African American Museum, it's the perfect timing, because I think people will be looking for that. Our visitors will be looking for that authentic experience.
Mm-hmm. And the museum, as you just mentioned, they just had their topping out ceremony.
So
They're
amazing.
looking to open in early 2022. How do you think that museum is going to change Charleston as a place that people want to travel to?
Well, it's going to give us this amazing opportunity to continue our interpretation and talk about the history of Charleston. Because if you think about the museum as a starting point, then you can actually go to a place like Middleton and actually see it, right? So it's really a jumping off part. So you've got the opportunity to help people plan their trip with that as the foundation of what makes us different and special.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you too about what you've seen during your career and then what you'd like to see going forward in terms of diversity and representation in leadership roles, in terms of seeing women in leadership roles, women of color, and also just every aspect of diversity. So I guess just first, what have you seen in your career? Have you seen that change at all in terms of who you're seeing in the room? And then what are some of those changes that you're looking to see in the future?
Well, I know that I'm really fortunate to have built my career in tourism, because tourism is one of the most inclusive industries just generally, right? And when I started back when I was 26, I was usually one of a handful of women that were head of convention and visitors bureaus. And today that has dramatically changed. I would say that it's, closer to a third or a half are women. And, you've seen that change gradually, but it continues to go up. I do think that it's important that we have more women of color in our world. And again, that's an opportunity that we have to bring more people into the family. The one thing we know in tourism marketing, or really with any marketing, is that diversity of thought builds better product, right? That opportunity that we have, it just makes it work for us in Charleston specifically, but really for everyone.
And I know you mentioned, so when you started in your career, being the head of the Visitors Bureau, there weren't too many other women in that role. You also, of course, serve other roles, and in this community too, you chair the Airport Authorities Board. That's definitely an environment where you find yourself being the only woman in the room, and I'm sure you found yourself in other situations where maybe you're the only woman in the room, or one of only a few women in the room. How do you tackle that? How do you approach those kinds of situations, and how do you think being the only woman in the room affects the outcome?
So I hope I bring something to the table with a diverse view, having a female at the table. And I really hope that that more industries are like the tourism industry. I mean, aeronautics just generally is engineering and math heavy, and so it's been more dominated by males. And you're starting to see that change, right? You see that change because of our amazing, more women in education interested in science and math, and so you're starting to see that change. So I think that in 10 years from now, I won't be the only girl at an airport board meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a good thing for the airport and for us.
What's your advice to someone who is stepping into an environment like that, where they are the only woman in the room on some kind of board, having some authority? What's your advice in that situation?
I guess I've always looked at it as a benefit to being a girl at a board meeting. And if you have that attitude that you have something to bring, and that you do know that you deserve to be there at the table, a lot of times I think we as women want to wait to be recognized versus starting at the table at the beginning. And my advice to any young leader is always going to be really curious. And there's never a person alive who doesn't want to be asked about whatever they're working on or about themselves personally. And that being curious really matters. And it brings an engagement that you're more interested in what the other person's saying than necessarily thinking about the next thing you're going to say.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had to handle any type of criticism that you think has to do with the fact that you're a woman in a position of leadership?
I think all women are measured in a different way, perhaps, than their male counterparts. And I think if you're aware of that, it takes that advantage that men may have away, right? If you're aware of that. I mean, like, the big joke at my office is the one day I don't wear a jacket will be the day that someone wants to see me at City Hall or something, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a few things that we can do to prepare for that and to know that that's out there. Someone's always going to be, could be critical about the way we look. They could be critical about the way we speak. And if you take those things away and you're comfortable and confident, those go away.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before some of the women who have had an influence on you have been a mentor in some type of way. What about for the women who look up to you as a mentor? What's the takeaway or the lesson, few nuggets of wisdom that you hope that they're getting from you that they might in an interview someday say, Helen taught me this? Well, what would you like them to say?
Well, you and I talked about Barbara Williams earlier.
Yes.
You know, she was obviously a pioneer in the newspaper business. She was the only girl in the room, right? And those women like Barbara and some of the women that you're going to interview always amaze me because of their very focused curiosity. And that is the thing that makes people the most excited, is when you're willing to listen to their great ideas. And you never know where a great idea is going to come from. Having a child that had a kidney transplant, you know, I've just seen it play out in the hospital environment as a bystander, as a mom. You know, we had a very scary time when Turner had his transplant when he was 3, and that night they were recognized that he had some internal bleeding after the day-long surgery. And I saw this thing play out where there were all these doctors in the room. The majority of them were men, and they were talking about all the things it could be. And there was this one young woman who was on the ultrasound machine. And as they were talking about prepping him to go back to surgery to stop this bleeding, she said, wait just a minute. Wasn't this child on dialysis? And you saw the heads flip around to look at her. And they said, yes, he was. She goes, I really think this is a little bit of dialysis fluid. I don't think it's blood. Well, just like that, she was the least powerful person in the room, but she had the greatest insight, and she was brave enough to speak up. And just like that, the whole room dissipated, and my child didn't have to go back to surgery, and he was fine. And but you can't ever underestimate where the good idea is going to come from. But we as women have to be brave enough to speak up.
I think that's a great closing note. Thank you so much.
I love being with you.